We have a giant industry that wants our healthcare system to stay the way it is because it's not working for families, but it's sure as heck working for them.
Making sure that every single sick American in this country is able to get the health care that they need. I believe Medicare for all is the way to do that.
I am the only candidate here who has passed a law protecting a woman's right of reproductive health and health insurance.
Okay, so now let's talk about Mayor Pete Buttigieg. I think that's how you're supposed to say it, Buttigieg. It's like Buttigieg, but gig, so Buttigieg. Mayor Pete is what I'm going to call him because it's so much easier, and I know I'm 100% right on that. So Mayor Pete, he has a ton of thoroughly detailed planks to his platform. He's got so many ideas that goes on and on. Criminal justice reform, democracy, consumer protections, affordable housing, infrastructure, investing in our teachers, gender equity. So he just has a ton of platform planks, and he's got a ton of details. So he's got plans. So he's the opposite of Marianne Williamson, right? Whereas he's not a great cheerleader, he has all the plans. So if you could just take a Marianne Williamson and a Mayor Pete and then put them together, so that way Mayor Pete can be more motivational and Marianne can have, some plans.
Congressman Ryan, today the Taliban claimed responsibility for killing 2 American service members in Afghanistan. Leaders as disparate as President Obama and President Trump have both said that they want to end U.S. involvement in Afghanistan, but it isn't over for America. Why isn't it over? Why can't presidents of very different parties and very different temperaments get us out of there, and how could you?
I appreciate that question. So I've been in Congress 17 years, and 12 of those years I've sat on the Armed Services Committee, either the Defense Appropriations Committee or the Armed Services Committee. And the lesson that I've learned over the years is that you have to stay engaged in these situations. Nobody likes it.
Some scaffolding, some infrastructure behind her ideas. So I'm going to start off with the criticisms, and there's not many so far, but with Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Mayor Pete, he has not declared a war on poverty. How easy is it to declare a war on poverty? Here, poverty's bullshit. It's a death sentence. I declare a war on poverty. It's easy. It's a bad thing, and, with this country's love of wars on drugs, wars on terror, wars on whatever. So there's no war on poverty. He's wrong about guns. He's for gun control. He's wrong about the war on drugs. He says he's going to combat the opioid and methamphetamine epidemics. How are you going to combat those? How are you going to combat the opioid and methamphetamine? Because the war on drugs doesn't work. We can only reduce the harm. So, and plus with opioids, you got a lot of older people. You got a lot of people that actually have pain. So people with legitimate pain can't get their opioids because of this huge crackdown.
And the oil and gas industry to aggressively address methane emissions. And we were also the first place to expand reproductive rights on a scale basis, and we reduced teen pregnancy by 54%. We've done the big progressive things that people said couldn't be done. I've done what pretty much everyone else up here is still talking about doing.
All right, Governor, thank you. Senator Sanders, I'll give you a chance to weigh in here. What is your response to those who say nominating a socialist would re-elect Donald Trump?
Well, I think the response is that the last poll I saw had us 10 points ahead of Donald Trump, because the American people understand that Trump is a phony, that Trump is a pathological liar.
And then the other thing, the last thing, so just 4 criticisms, actually 5. Let me mention this one first. So his foreign policy is severely underdeveloped, and I'll get to that in a second. Now, he's also like Kamala Harris, that he wants to evaluate ICE and the Border Patrol practices to ensure a similar humanitarian crisis never happen again. So evaluate, you're going to evaluate, look at the fucking news, look at the media. You can tell that these ICE is where the birth of the Third Reich, American Third Reich, is going to come from. So just evaluating ICE? No, we got to abolish ICE. Just get, abolish ICE and then give the Border Patrol power to go after immigration. Why do we? So anyways, he's only evaluating ICE. He's not abolishing ICE. He hasn't declared a war on poverty. He's wrong about guns. He's wrong about the war on drugs. And foreign policy, his foreign policy is severely underdeveloped. So the only thing he says about foreign policy is we need to end these endless wars. So Mayor Pete Buttigieg is just as progressive as Tucker Carlson and even Donald Trump. Donald Trump tweeted in these endless wars.
And a racist, and that he lied to the American people during his campaign. He said he was going to stand up for working families. Well, President Trump, you're not standing up for working families when you try to throw 32 million people off the health care that they have, and that 83% of your tax benefits go to the top 1%.
So when it comes to what his foreign policy is, I don't know. And there's a lot of questions I have when it comes to foreign policy. What are you going to do about the war on terror? What are you going to do about Congress having war powers? What are you going to do in Venezuela, Palestine, Yemen? What about Iran? What about Saudi Arabia being our biggest major ally? What about unfreezing Cuba-U.S. relations? What about Edward Snowden? What about Julian Assange, Chelsea Bradley Manning? What about Edward Snowden? So there's a lot of questions that I have about Mayor Pete Buttigieg's foreign policy. And him being a military man, I think he would be, cognizant. He would know that these issues are going on. So his foreign policy is going to end these endless wars. Okay, well, on foreign policy, just like Marianne Williamson, he's got, the right policy, but he doesn't have any details. He doesn't have a plan. He doesn't have any way of getting us there.
Senator Warren, I'm going to get you. I will get you 30 seconds. I promise. Let me get this question. We're trying. I know you guys, we got other issues we're trying to get to, including a big one coming up in a minute. But Senator Warren, I want to continue on the Mitch McConnell thing because you have a lot of ambitious plans. You have a plan for that. Okay. We talked about the Supreme Court. Do you have a plan to deal with Mitch McConnell if you don't beat him in the Senate? If he's still sitting there as the Senate Majority Leader, it's very plausible you be elected president with a Republican Senate. Do you have a plan to deal with Mitch McConnell?
I do.
So he needs to, develop his foreign policy. And he also needs to, come out against the war on drugs, and he needs to be in favor of the war on poverty. And then, ICE, he needs to abolish ICE. And if you could get a dozen, if you could get poverty solved, okay, then we could talk about gun control. But as long as the American people are going to give one group of people, the poor people, a death sentence, and not give a damn, well, they're not going to get, education and the health care and they're not going to get a lot of stuff. They're not going to get the police protection that they need. They need to be able to defend themselves. So those are the things that I believe are bad about Mayor Pete Buttigieg's issues, his planks. Now, there's an interesting idea, and we'll get to all the good ideas at the end, but an interesting idea that he had mentioned was that Mayor Pete wants to depoliticize the Supreme Court.
If I were president today, I would sign an executive order that would get rid of Trump's zero-tolerance policy, the Remain in Mexico policy, and the metering policy. This metering policy is basically what prompted Oscar and Valeria to make that risky swim across the river. They have been playing games with people who are coming and trying to seek asylum at our ports of entry. Oscar and Valeria went to a port of entry, and then they were denied the ability to make an asylum claim. So they got frustrated, and they tried to cross the river, and they died because of that.
On day one, sorry.
On day one, I would do that executive order that would address metering, and then I would follow that up in my first 100 days with immigration reform.
Depoliticized. And so he says that he wants 10 members confirmed in the normal political fashion. So we got 9 Supreme Court justices now, right? And so he's adding another member, and then he's going to have 5 promoted from the lower courts by unanimous agreement of the other 10. And so, some people have proposed term limits, but Pete's going to create a bipartisan reform commission for the purpose of recommending structural improvements to protect the Supreme Court from further politicization. So I got some issues with this, okay? Bernie Sanders, he had said that he wants to change the Supreme Court too. He says that we can rotate the judges. via the Constitution. So he says somehow we can rotate the judges on the Supreme Court. Now, I have a lot of problems with this, okay? So he's adding another member, and then he's going to say 5. So it has to be an odd number so that way when there's a vote, and if it's uneven, it has to go one way or another. If you have an even number, then that would – so he's adding 1 permanent member, which brings it up to 10, right? So that's even, but then he adds 5 later on from within. Well, I believe that the judicial system, the judicial branch, is too insular anyways. They'll protect the lawyers, they'll protect the prosecutors, they'll protect the judges, but not the people. So if you have a lawyer, you spend thousands of dollars on some asshole lawyer, they'll give you some due deference. But if you don't have a lawyer, well, they're not even going to treat you like you're a person. This is a game for only the lawyered class. So the judicial branch is very much out of reach for the common man and woman in America. So by him pulling 5 of these judges from inside the judicial branch, how about instead of pulling, these judges from, pool of judges, why don't we start making, like, regular folks judges? I would trust the judgment of a janitor or a McDonald's worker or somebody that's working class much better than, some prick that had $250,000 to go to law school and then get into this, elite little lawyer club.
President literally went on TV on Fox and said that people's heads would spin when they see how much he would bring down pharmaceutical prices. Instead, 2,500 drugs have gone up in double digits since he came into office. For the rest of us, for the rest of America, that's what we call at home, all foam and no beer.
So I'm against the way he's depoliticizing the Supreme Court, but perhaps that bipartisan reform commission could come up with different ideas. I think they should consider Bernie Sanders' idea. I don't see how, rotating judges on the Supreme Court doesn't seem like a bad thing, but I'm not sure exactly what rotating judges means. So what are we doing? We're just, cycling in and out so they don't have lifetime appointments anymore? That seems like that would be more political. There's another interesting idea that he talks about is he labels this under extremism, and that's a bad thing, okay? But when you look into what he's actually talking about, he's very much like Antifa. He's saying we need to counter domestic terrorism and white supremacist violence. We do need to target white supremacist violence. We need to nip fascism right in the bud. The communists in Germany could not stop the Nazis. Only Antifa could do it. You nip it in the bud. You see fascism, you stop fascism. So when he's talking about getting more federal resources for white supremacists, and he's saying that anti-government militias, white supremacists, other groups that use forms of domestic extremism, we need to, go after them. And we do. Terrorism is terrorism, so just because you have a different hue of skin color doesn't mean that you're not a terrorist if you're using violence for political reasons. I have a problem with him labeling this extremism, though. So if extremism by itself is not the problem. If you're an extremist for love, if you're an extremist against hatred, if you're an extremist for peace, safety, protection, food, water, clothing, and if you're an extremist against violence, murder, rape, stealing, criminal activities, violence, that's good. You should be an extremist against bad things and an extremist in favor of good things. So the question isn't whether or not you're an extremist. The question is, what kind of things are you an extremist on? And so when he just labels this under extremism, yeah, the white supremacist terrorists are, not only are they extreme, but they're wrong and stupid, right? So it's not, extremism by itself, though, isn't the problem. It's when you're not extreme about good things, when you're extreme, for bad things. So white supremacists are bad extremists, anti-government militias. Now, we are a revolutionary, country, so to have an anti-government militia, that's actually consistent with the Constitution, and so I guess I'm a little worried about that, too, because anti-government militia a lot of times are the white supremacists and the Nazis and a lot of these really bad groups, but they could just be, it's anti-government militia, so it's like guns and government. But it's by itself, you can organize a militia and you could be anti-government without actually acting upon it. So you can have the rhetoric and you can speak out against it and you can be organized for self-defense reasons. So I could see, why he would, want to come after, crack down on anti-government militia if he's the government. But our, Thomas Jefferson said we need a rebellion every now and then, every 20 years. And then also the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. He said that after Shays' rebellion. Shays' rebellion, Daniel Shays is going to die in poverty and obscurity, and he was an American Revolutionary soldier. So he was an American revolutionary, fought for the good fight, couldn't pay his farm bills, and then got kicked off his farm and then decided to throw another revolution. Daniel Shays was right. Now, there's several ways you can do revolution, so you can, become elected, right? So Mayor Pete becomes elected. Well, he was anti-government. He's anti this government, right? So he's not a militia, but, I don't feel like those two ideas by themselves are bad. I do like that he's going after the white supremacist violence. I like that he's mentioning it. And like I said, it's an interesting idea. But when he mentions, well, extremism is bad, extremism, what did Barry Goldwater said? He said, extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. So that means you must give a shit about freedom. You must give a shit about justice. You must be an extremist about peace, freedom, justice. You must be. If you actually, you think that we're all equals and we all have the same political rights, that, every person is born equal, so that means you have the same freedom of speech and the right to petition, the right to religion as everybody else.
We got nothing out of it.
There are a lot of politicians who say, oh, it's just not possible, we just can't do it, have a lot of political reasons for this. What they're really telling you is they just won't fight for it.
Every woman can make her own decisions about her own body and has access to the care that makes that possible.
Would you replace private insurance?
No, I think that choice is fundamental to our ability to get everybody cared for.
Private insurance is not working for tens of millions of Americans. When you talk about the co-pays, the deductibles, the premiums, the out-of-pocket expenses, it's not working.
The insurance companies last year alone sucked $23 billion in profits out of the healthcare system. $23 billion.
The last thing I'm going to mention for this video is he's got a goodish idea when it comes to health care. You had 4 different candidates when it came to health care. Who's going to abolish the private?
Who here would abolish their private health insurance in favor of a government-run plan? Just a show of hands, start off with. All right, well.
So Mayor de Blasio, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Kamala Harris. And I'll repeat it again because this is an important distinction. So, the right solution is probably an amalgamation between private and public, but does anybody have, any concerns that the private industry isn't going to get their hands into the health insurance or the health industry? So Bernie Sanders has called for just a government health care program and get rid of all the private insurance companies, and so is de Blasio, so is Elizabeth Warren, and so is Kamala Harris. I don't hate that. Even though, what's going to end up happening is going to be a mixture, because that's our system, is a mixture of government spending and, McDonald's. So we got private corporations and we got, public education and libraries and roads. So we got government spending all over the place. When I think about it in terms of game theory, when I think about it in terms of deal making and negotiating, when you are in favor of just government health care and you're going to eliminate the private insurance, and Bernie said it right, they love their doctors, they love their hospitals, nobody loves their insurance. Those insurance companies they're greedy, they're just trying to make a shit ton of money off of your, pain and suffering and illness. So when I think about, who do I want going into the White House to fight for universal health care? I'm sick of talking about universal health care. Obama said he was going to get us some universal health care. Hillary said she was going to get us some universal health care, but we never got it. So we waited 20 years after, Hillary failed, and then we got Obamacare, which was a sellout to the private insurance industry. No public option, no government health care. We were forced to buy private insurance under Obamacare. So which one of these candidates, the person who says, I'm for a mixture of government health care and private insurance, or the candidate that says, I'm only for government health care? The people that says that they are only for government health care, will definitely get us universal health care. They definitely will. They don't believe in any private insurance whatsoever. So they can't mealy-mouth. They can't talk out both ends of their mouth. They can't play politics with this and just say, oh, universal health care is in, extend the coverage, but actual government health care. So Mayor Bill de Blasio, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Kamala Harris will definitely get us health insurance or government health care. We will have, if you're sick, you can go to the hospital when Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, and de Blasio are president, and you'll be taken care of. Guaranteed, without a doubt. Now, these other candidates who say, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, let's get some government health care and let's get some private insurance, that's where it's going to end up anyway. So I'm not against it. So for Mayor Pete Buttigieg, that's him. He wants, a mixture of private insurance and Medicare. And the way that they're going to do it is they're going to offer a public option. And then they're going to let the free market take over. So if you want government health care, you could choose to get government health care. If you want private insurance, you could choose to get private insurance. So that's his, he's in favor of universal health care. He talks about it, at least. He's saying we need to get everybody covered. But when it comes to who's guaranteed to get me health care, well, I know de Blasio, Bernie, and Kamala and Warren will. But when it comes to Mayor Pete Buttigieg, is he going to, just Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, talk about health care, and then they get in, and then he just goes ahead and sacrifices government health care like it ain't shit? So I have more confidence in those four, de Blasio, Warren, Bernie, and Kamala, than I do the other candidates who say they want a mixture of private and public insurance. So under Pete Buttigieg, we will definitely get, when it comes to health care, a public option. Okay, so that's good. It's good-ish, but it's not, it's not Bernie Sanders. So Bernie Sanders will definitely get us government health care. Mayor Pete Buttigieg, I think he'll definitely get us a public option, but I'm not for sure if we'll get much more than that. And public option is really all we need. But again, when it comes to the negotiating, if you've already compromised, when you've walked into the the Republicans are going to defend private, insurance companies till the day they die. It's more important for these assholes to make money off of people's misery than for people to actually get well. Republicans don't want you to get well. They want you to stay sick forever. And they don't give a shit. I mean, if you're sick, then that's less competition for you. So, God, we're going to take care of the health of the people. And they want to pretend like they're pro-life. Yeah, I'm sure you're pro-life.
How would you stand up against China?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we've got to recognize that the China challenge really is a serious one. This is not something to dismiss or wave away. And if you look at what China is doing, they're using technology for the perfection of dictatorship. But their fundamental economic model isn't going to change because of some tariffs. I live in the industrial Midwest. Folks who aren't in the shadow of a factory are somewhere near a soy field where I live. And manufacturers, and especially soy farmers, are hurting. Tariffs are taxes. And Americans are going to pay on average $800 more a year because of these tariffs. Meanwhile, China is investing so that they could soon be able to run circles around us in artificial intelligence. And this president is fixated on the China relationship as if all that mattered was the export balance on dishwashers. We've got a much bigger issue on our hands. But at a moment when their authoritarian model is being held up as an alternative to ours because ours looks so chaotic compared to theirs right now because of our internal divisions, the biggest thing we've got to do is invest in our own domestic competitiveness. If we disinvest in our own infrastructure, education, we are never going to be able to compete. And if we really want to be an alternative, a democratic alternative, we actually have to demonstrate that we care about democratic values at home and around the world.
So Mayor Pete Buttigieg triangulated the healthcare industry, the universal health care issue. And then on free college and child care for all, Bernie's plan is just better to Mayor Pete's. Bernie's saying he's going to get child care for all. I don't remember hearing Mayor Pete say that. And then on free college, he's still talking about, cutting up, some people get free college, some people don't. So when it comes to Bernie Sanders, his free college, free health care, and free child care for everybody policy is better than Mayor Pete Buttigieg. And I'm going to get into everything that's good about Mayor Pete coming up next.
Do you have a plan to deal with Mitch McConnell?
I do.